Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in these United States of America. I want to be the first to welcome you to this programming today that is a conversation with Afro-Latinx legal professionals in the United States. My name is Daryl Wilson, and I currently serve as the director of the diversity and inclusion team for the ABA Young Lawyers Division. I'm very excited about this program. For one, when I took the role, my idea that I had was to basically bring awareness and highlight different diverse groups across the United States within the legal profession. And we started out our terms in September, and the first step was the Hispanic Heritage Month, which began on September 15th and will run through October 15th. So as we begin to wrap up the Heritage Month, I want you all to know that we should be celebrating all heritage throughout the year, but we want to make sure that as part of the D&I team of the ABA-YLD, that we bring some awareness against the different groups of diverse lawyers that we have in the country. And so today our program will focus on the Hispanic Heritage Month and the Afro-Latinx, as you'll hear from those individuals in that class and their different respective roles within the legal profession and how they got to their journeys. So with that, I want to turn it over to Scholar Larissa Mervin, who took on this program, and she did an absolute great job getting it planned. And so I'm sure that we're all in for a treat today. So now I will turn it over to Larissa. Larissa.
Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate that. My name is Larissa Magnon Mervin. I am an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina in our Charlotte office. Super excited to be here today. Like Daryl said, this is going to be a great program. So thankful to the panelists for participating. Before we get started, I'd like to give a few shout outs. So I'd like to thank the ABA-YLD leadership as a whole, our chair, Troy Portis, as well as everybody on the leadership team. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. And I wouldn't be a scholar. And so I'm very grateful for their leadership. Also want to give Daryl a shout out, even though he just spoke. He has been instrumental in putting this program together. It would not have happened without his leadership and his connections and just his support all the way around. So thank you, Daryl. And to the ABA staff who on the back end are just doing everything to get it together. Renee Lugo, Tracy Kemp, everybody who's participated. Thank you so much for your help with this. So with that, we'll get started. I'd like to introduce our wonderful panelists. You may go to the next screen, please. Thank you. So our faculty today is Dorlyn de Dios. She is a felony assistant district attorney for Kings County District Attorney's Office, and she's also the president of the Dominican Bar Association. Hi, Dorlyn, glad to have you. We also have Adriana Foreman. She's an associate at Littler Mendelsohn. Luis Mercedes, he's a member at Mintz Levin. Justina Rivera, an acting general counsel for the New York City Office of the Comptroller. And then I already introduced myself as the moderator. We're so excited to be here today. So before we get started with the panel questions, and by the way, thank you so much to everybody who sent in questions. You guys had really thoughtful questions, and we hope to address as many of them as possible. And whatever we don't get to, if you can find us on LinkedIn or wherever, feel free to reach out. But first, we're going to share a quick video that we believe gives context to the conversation, just an introductory understanding of what it means to be of Afro-Latinx heritage. So we'll share that now.
Can you tell who I am by the color of my skin?
What does my skin say about me?
Does it help if I add a Villanueva?
How about Morales?
How about a little Benitez?
So, what is the Afro-Latino experience?
Hi, to be Afro-Latina. It means I'm a mixtura. I'm a mixture.
Some of the things that happened in Latin America were different for African-descended people. Laws against intermarriage were not as prevalent and sometimes non-existent. There was more of a tradition of free blacks in Latin America, which allowed African-descended people to establish independent towns and in that way nurture some of the root aspects of African culture that were kind of more destroyed in the United States.
When I first realized wow, this really exists. I was in high school and I'm doing this, me and a lady doing the photo shoot, and there comes this gentleman and he tells a lady right in front of me, "Why are you taking a picture of this?" And he said the N-word. And I'm like, whoa. To me, I was scared, just a kid, I'm just a regular human being. It affected me a lot at first. I remember calling my mom and wanted to leave. But, my mom always preached to me, in order to get what you want, you gotta make certain sacrifices. And that was one of the sacrifices I had to deal with at the time, it's racism. Racism is real.
I will never forget the day I told my mother, who is a fair-skinned Puerto Rican, that I was black. No, you're not black. You're Puerto Rican. And I remember saying to her, "But Mom, Puerto Ricans are not a race." I don't care. You're Puerto Rican. She was near tears. Back on the island, they didn't see things in black and white. And when she heard me reference myself that way, I think she was fearful.
I think some of the challenges being an Afro-Latino, they could experience is exactly what I experienced in high school. Not looking at you as who you are, what you bring to the table, versus them judging you by the color of your skin. I think being a Latino, you have to deal with that every day.
Music is a wonderful way of connecting Latinos, especially with such a mixing in the United States now where we have different generations.
Oh, that's definitely true. I think that a lot of people who are,
sort of seeking out these opportunities to understand.
Almost very isolated in a sense.
The Latino versus the African American culture is just apples and orange. If you look at me, you don't see, Hispanic. Look at my skin, you would think I'm black. Spanish-speaking people, when somebody's talking about me, look how tall he is or something, or I wonder how tall he is, and I just jump in Spanish and just sort of say, yeah. And they look at me and they're like, wow, where you from?
I feel so proud and blessed to be a Latina or an Afro-Latina. I get to listen to great music. I get to speak multiple languages. I get to feel a kinship with an island in the Caribbean.
I was born in America, but both my parents were born in the Dominican Republic. Growing up in a Dominican household is, I love everything about it. The food, the culture. I love being Dominican, being able to speak 2 languages. It's a beautiful thing, man. I was very prideful of my culture.
So we hope that gave you, again, an introductory understanding of the concept of, what it means to be of Afro-Latinx heritage. There's so many more resources out there. So I encourage you guys to do your research and look it up, because there really are some really great videos and articles. So with that, we'll get started on the panel. This first question is going to go to every single panelist. What does it mean to you to be of Afro-Latinx heritage, and how has that shaped your experiences? So I'm just going to call on you as I see you on my screen. We'll start with Louis.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Larissa. What does it mean to be of Afro-Latinx heritage? To me, it just means recognizing the intersection of my ethnicity with race, right? Embracing it and recognizing the fact that I am both Latino and I am Black. I come from have African descendants. And it wasn't until later in life that I came to sort of embrace that I identify myself as Afro-Latino or more Black Latino. I think Afro-Latino, Afro-Latinx is a term that's been kind of used more recently, but I identify myself as Black Latino. I mean, I grew up in New York City, Washington Heights, predominantly Dominican neighborhood. So I grew up identifying as Dominicano, identifying as Latino. It was not until I went to college, Boston College, and I really was faced with being perceived as, or folks just see me as Black, and not as Latino or Dominicano. So to me, it means recognizing and embracing the intersection of both my Latino and African heritage.
Great, thank you. Justina?
Yeah, sure, thank you, Larissa. So just by way of background, I am, or I identify as both Black and Hispanic. I was born and raised in New York City by my Hispanic dad, my Dominican dad, who was born in the Dominican Republic, and my Black mom, whose family hails from Alabama. So for me, I always grew up feeling like I was, I definitely was in both worlds, but this concept of, Afro-Latina or Afro-Latinx, that's definitely something I feel like it's a newer conversation. So for me, I think about a quote by Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, where she says, it's important for all of us to appreciate where we come from and how that history has really shaped us in ways that we don't understand. So when I think about my heritage, I think about it in the context of my ancestors, the fact that I come from people of resilience, people of determination, creativity, a deep sense of faith, a vibrant culture, music, food, the list goes on. And I think about the fact that I bring all of that with me wherever I go. The stuff that I know and also the stuff that I don't know about my heritage or my family. And I bring all of that into every room, both in professional and personal context.
Wonderful. I love that quote. Thanks. Adriana?
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you. So again, by way of background, I am first generation American. My mother is Mexican and my dad is Jamaican. And so growing up, I always sort of struggled with knowing how I identify as myself. It took a while for me to accept that, okay, I am Black. And then most recently to finally identify myself as Afro-Latina, which I think is a more accurate term. And to me, being Afro-Latina, I feel very blessed and very proud of my heritage and the fact that I'm Afro-Latina. I feel grateful that I'm able to experience both cultures and to feel a sense of community with Black people and Latinos as well. I feel like I have the best of both worlds. And most importantly, I feel like my success to me means more as an Afro-Latina, because when I succeed, I'm doing it for my Hispanos, I'm doing it for the Black community. I feel like I'm able to impact more people, and I'm also invested in helping both of my communities succeed.
Love it. Thank you. Dorlin?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me here today. I echo so much of what Justina and Adriana just said. For me, by way of background as well, I was born here in the States, in the Bronx, but I really spent my formative years in Dominican Republic. I did all of middle school and high school in Dominican Republic. Both of my parents are Dominican, and I came back for college. My experience was very unique because I did have that American experience of being considered an Afro-Latina and then living in the Dominican Republic as an American. So it was very interesting, and I definitely learned a lot from both of these experiences. But for me, really, being an Afro-Latina is a superpower because, like Adriana just mentioned, I am the best, or get to be the best of both worlds. There's so much richness going through my veins, African, Indigenous, European, I have it all, according to my genealogical DNA test anyways. But with this power that I have, I just feel like I can truly relate and identify with so many people, like you all mentioned, and I understand one's struggle, and it really lends me to a higher cultural intelligence. And that has shaped my experience in the legal profession a lot, again, echoing what some of you've mentioned, because I feel like I help two separate communities. So that impact is greater than it would have been if I solely identified as one of them. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing.
Wonderful, thank you. So going along with those experiences, one of the viewer questions was, do you think your lived experiences help you better advocate for your clients? And if so, how so? And whoever wants to take this one can take it.
I can start. So for the first 3 years as an assistant district attorney, I was a prosecutor in the domestic violence unit. There were a lot of, Black and Latinos victims and defendants that I had to deal with and work with on a daily basis. And I can definitely attest that being a woman who spoke Spanish, who looked like my victims, was so helpful for my cases because my survivors definitely identified with me and were able to open up and relate. And I can truly understand the cultural differences and why certain decisions were made. That helped me in assessing my cases. So that for sure was one way that being Afro-Latina helped me in my profession.
Thank you, that's great. Yeah, does anybody else wanna answer that question?
Just to piggyback on that, I'm a corporate lawyer. I represent sort of companies and individuals buying and selling businesses. So I thought about how to have my lived experiences influence, my profession. But I think it goes back to my immigrant parents, grandparents, and at an early age, being an advocate as an interpreter or helping my grandparents navigate like immigration papers and things of that nature, where I was translating, helping them navigate different things in English. And I go back and look at, what I enjoy about the profession now, and is being an advisor and counselor to my clients. That's what I enjoy. And I think that from an early age, just having that advocacy, that ability to help, at that point, my grandparents, my parents navigate through certain things, and being an advocate for them sort of geared me towards what I'm doing now, which is what I enjoy, just helping clients, helping my family navigate through certain issues, helping them understand and being able to assess different situations.
Great, wonderful. Adriana or Justina, did you want to address it, or should we move on to the next question? There's
I know
so
there are
many.
a lot
I'm
of
happy
questions.
to move on. I was gonna say there's so many.
Yeah.
It was really great, thoughtful questions. So we'll move on. How do you balance the need for systemic change with your duty as an officer of the court and a member of the bar?
I'm not sure if I completely understand that question, but I'm going to answer it in the context of how do you balance, as a lawyer, how do you balance your client's interests, your personal ethics, and your personal values, and that would go to understanding that there needs to be systemic change. And we could talk about it in the context of, if we want to just focus on race in America, because I think that's what I'm hearing, but also, as it pertains to maybe people who speak English is not their first language, those different things. I think you have to bring all of that to the table with you. First, I think you also have to grapple with your own bias. One of the things that, we talked about in preparing for this is not feeling like you belong, right? I think that's the biggest issue with the systemic racism is folks don't belong, like they don't feel like they belong. And that is a problem, not only systemically, it's a problem within the Latino culture, within, and then you can break it down even further. Just talk about New York City, Puerto Ricans versus Dominicans, right? Or Puerto Ricans and Dominicans versus people from Latin America, or Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and people from Latin America versus people from Spain, right? So you have to, what I would say is that you have to first acknowledge where you are, and then figure out how you can bring that to the table. So for me, the way I do that, and I can't stress this enough, is show up with your whole self, right? Starting from how people pronounce your name. If they anglicize your name, correct them. I mean, it seems so simple, but there's so much power in that, For me, I use the Americanized version of my name because that's how I was raised, right? But for someone else, it may be Justina. And if someone says Justina, they should correct them. So it starts very, like, there's so much power in starting small and just first embracing yourself as both, as Afro-Latinx. Like, that's where, at least for me, that's where my power started, from saying, yes, I am both. I am enough, I am Black enough, I am Latina enough, and then bringing that with me wherever I went.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's one of the questions of Black enough versus Latino enough. And, some people have expressed alienation within their own communities. I'm not Black enough for the Black community, I'm not Latino enough for the Latino community, in the sense of alienation and like not belonging. Do any of you, or have any of you, I guess, ever, felt that way? How did you address it? What are your experiences surrounding that?
I can go. I've definitely felt that. I don't always fit in with the Hispanic or the Black community, even though at the same time, I do feel like I have a sense of community with both. Because early on, when I was in Spanish speaking groups or with Latinos, sometimes people would start speaking Spanish, and I'm bilingual, I can speak Spanish, but I'm more comfortable speaking English. And my Spanish is a bit more rusty. So I always felt a bit like I didn't fully connect in those groups. I've also experienced racism and colorism from lighter skinned Latinos as well. So obviously that doesn't make me feel welcome in my community either. And then in Black spaces or Black groups, I would always get the comment of, well, you're not fully Black, you're Latina. And so there were just a lot of instances growing up of feeling othered in both of my communities. As far as handling it then, I kind of just let it go. But it bothered me. And I think it's taken time for me to get comfortable with just accepting my identity and accepting the fact that I belong to both, and not letting that dwell or bother me. I've sort of learned to embrace it and to try and use it as an advantage. Instead of hiding certain aspects of myself or feeling like I wasn't enough, I just tried to use it to my advantage. And some ways of doing that is just like, I feel like it's expanded my network professionally. I feel like because I do speak Spanish, I'm more comfortable in my Spanish now, and I've been able to get staffed on cases because of it. So I do feel like there's a benefit, and it's just taken time to sort of shift my mentality.
Great. Louis and Dorlin, I see you shaking your heads. Did you want to add to that question?
I mean, just to piggyback on that, right? I don't think that Adriana's experience is uncommon, right? At sometimes you do feel othered by both communities, right? Because you part of depending on how you identify, right? Because I think in terms of real talk, there is colorism in the Latin American community, and there's this anti-Black, sentiment, not only in Latin communities, but just in general, and folks just try to identify with being lighter skinned or with white European attributes. And even as Dominicans, there's a real issue with that. So folks, generally, I hate to sort of generalize, but do not identify as Black because of the historical context of being Black and the actual discrimination that goes on even in the island to folks that are darker skinned. I mean, my brother, who's a fellow member of the bar, general counsel here in the United States, he played professional basketball in the Dominican Republic, and he was refused entry into a club they told him it was a private party and it was just based on the color of his skin. So you do experience that discrimination, that otherness in both the Latin American and the Black communities as well. I mean, I grew up, like I mentioned, in New York City, Washington Heights, predominantly Dominican neighborhood. I went to predominantly Black and Latino schools, and there, you know, folks identified as Black or Latino, right? And Black folks saw you as Latino and not really as Black. And I think it's not when you're in white majority environments where folks start really self-reflecting, and folks are seeing you as for who you are, right? First, they see your pigment. I don't think anybody would identify me or did identify me in college as being Dominican. Now, folks didn't even know what Dominican was. They asked me if I was Cape Verdean or something else, right? So as Latino, they would see me as a Black man. And folks, then you start sort of identifying with each community and celebrating each part of yourself. But definitely, that has been a feeling that I have experienced, even, you know, while marketing or in the profession, you know, marketing to, I'm in the private equity space, right, which is a white male dominated industry, and a lot of the Latinos that you see in that space are also, you know, more lighter skinned, and I have felt, do I identify with these Latinos? Do they feel like I'm Latino when I go to these conferences and I'm trying to network and market? Do I feel embraced by my fellow Latinos that way? And when I go to, you know, the National Bar Association conference, I go to HMBA conference, Hispanic National Bar Association conference, well, folks thinking, well, you should be at HMBA and not the National Bar Association because you're Latino and not Black. And not that, and I have felt that kind of otherness at those conferences, but you continue to embrace who you are.
I think you raised
Go ahead, Justina.
I was just gonna say, I think you raise a great point about what we can do to make our spaces in the legal profession more inclusive, because I have felt that way all the way starting in law school, right? That I didn't necessarily fit in LALSA because I was Afro-Latina, right? I don't speak, you know, I speak a version of Spanglish, Dominican Spanglish, that doesn't really exist anywhere other than outside of New York City and probably in my home, right? And it's very fast and convoluted. But I struggled in law school with fitting in and finding my place, which I think we all know in law school, it's very important to have those networks. And it wasn't until after law school, I will tell you, I think people see me and they see a Black woman, particularly how I speak, how I present myself, spaces that I've been in, and I gravitated to more of the Black bar associations, the Black legal events, those type of things. And it took almost like a self-reckoning and me kind of getting out of my comfort zone and saying, I'm not going to be insecure. And people like Dora, who's made, you know, like her representing the DBA, being able to say, no, I fit in here too, even though I don't, you know, I might be somewhere and everyone starts speaking Spanish or at HMBA. And I think it's just something that bar leaders should be mindful of, particularly affinity bar groups, whether it's in the law school context or even post law school, that these are spaces where everyone feels like they have a place. Even though, you know, and understanding that we are nowhere near a monolith, we're so complex, even beyond our skin complexions, our skin tones, or even what countries our families are from.
That's wonderful. And that actually brings me to my next point of imposter syndrome. And one of the questions was, you know, do you deal with imposter syndrome? And particularly in law school and now as a lawyer, like how do you navigate imposter syndrome and how does that affect your practice?
I can go. So I definitely deal with imposter syndrome all the time, probably like every day. But I sort of realized that it's a burden that I'm placing on myself. So I do a few things. One, I try to reflect on how far I've come. I worked really hard to get to where I am. And so I'm meant to be here. And I've worked hard to be here. So that's one. But I also try to surround myself with positive messages Whenever I make mistakes, even if it's something really small, I really beat myself up over it. And that fuels my imposter syndrome. So I leave like little sticky notes on my desk. I have something that says like, be kind to yourself. You're learning, you'll grow from this. And so it's a reminder that this is normal. This is a process and everyone is going through this. And then I also have other things, like I have a plaque that says La Jefa to remind myself that I'm the boss and to give me the confidence, to remind myself every day that I've got this. I also have I call it a Oh Happy Days folder. So when I get positive feedback from my supervisors, I put it in that folder. And so whenever I'm feeling down, I can refer to it and remind myself that I am bringing value, that I'm meant to be here as well. And then I think it's also important to have mentors that you can identify with. So I have mentors that are Black, Latino, Afro-Latinos, and they serve as a motivation for me, because if they were able to get to where they are, then I can do it too. And they also help to ground me and to sort of remind me of everything that I just said, that I'm meant to be here, and to give me sort of the push and the confidence that I need. So that's sort of how I've at least navigated dealing with my imposter syndrome.
Dorlin, do you have anything on that? I see you shaking your head.
I was hoping you didn't call on me for a very specific reason. And I don't want to come off anyway. It's just that I personally don't think I deal with imposter syndrome. And it's because very early on in my life, I've kind of shifted my mindset, whereas I know my value and that I can achieve anything I want to achieve irrespective of my surroundings or circumstances. And if I don't obtain something, it's not because of the color of my skin. It's not because I don't belong. It's because I didn't put in the effort. So for me, that doesn't really apply, but I have seen firsthand how it affects a lot of my friends and colleagues, and I hate it. And I try to work on changing those environments in my job. I'm part of several committees or within the bars associations, because I don't want our community to think like that they don't belong, because they do. And like I said in the beginning of my introduction, being who we are is a superpower, and we need to believe that, just like Justina mentioned before. Just own who you are, and you will flourish in ways that you can't imagine.
I would say I'm in between Adriana and Dora, in that I view it as, I think I first really grappled with imposter syndrome in law school. First semester grades were atrocious by my standards, by what I was used to, 4.0 student, and then going into law school and what, a B-, those type of things. But anyway, I say that to say, and then not feeling like I belong. I say that to say my view has always been, no, I don't belong to your little club of closed-mindedness, and only certain people from certain backgrounds and certain experiences and certain looks can fit in, but I do deserve to be here. And whether I deserve to be here because I already, I'm qualified, or deserve to be here because somebody saw something in me and they know that I can do the work. Because sometimes you're not qualified. You get a role or opportunity and you're like, but you know that you're smart enough, you're resilient enough, you're resourceful enough that you can do it. That's how I think of it. And so for me, it's kind of like, okay, I may not belong here, but I deserve to be here. And I'm going to rise to the challenge of being here. And I think that's when we're talking about that. A lot of that comes from our heritage, right? And comes from what it's in our DNA to say, all right, you're going to put a barrier, or I'm going to jump over it. I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to set it on fire. I'm going to do something. And I'm going to show you why I belong here. And I'm not going to carry that with me. I'm not going to let that impact how I see myself and how I do my job. I'm just going to do my job, and I'm going to do it well. And I'm going to do it so well that next time you see someone that looks like me or has a background with me, you're not going to think twice about hiring them or giving them an opportunity or whatever it is. And that's kind of how I live my life and how I navigate those spaces.
That's great. Oh, go ahead, Louis.
I just want to just add to that, right? Because we've heard different perspectives, and I love Dorlin's viewpoint. I wish I would have had it when I started undergrad and my career, right? Because I think the research will tell you that a lot of folks of color experience imposter syndrome, right? And it's just, I think it's part of the implicit bias coming into an environment, and folks think that you're already not up to par, your work is less than, and struggling with that and making sure that every single thing that you do is excellent work. And to what Adriana said, if I make a little mistake here and there, I think a lot of us are just in constant fear of making this catastrophic mistake that's going to be a career ender. And I think you have to realize, at least in our profession, this is the practice of law, right? You don't start at a law firm or practicing knowing what you're doing, right? You have to learn it. You have to have mentors. You have to have folks that are teaching you how to practice law, and that you're not going to know everything, right? You're smart enough because you've gone through the rigors of the law school education. You've gone through that LSAT score, right? So you should feel like you definitely belong and you have the intellect to do what you're doing. But, you know, practice without fear. And I've learned this now as I've gotten older, right? I wasn't always like this. Practice without fear. You are smart enough. You do belong in these spaces. And not everybody knows everything. And so people might pretend like they know something. You might have a partner, if you're an associate, trying to explain to you an assignment that partner is confused him or herself about, but it's trying to make you seem like you don't know what you're doing. And just be confident in yourself to ask the question. I don't understand this. Like, just the fact because you don't understand it, it could be that somebody's not explaining something clearly. So I think first of all is understanding that you do belong. You're smart enough, you've put in the work, and this is called the practice of law. So you're constantly learning. You're not perfectly practicing all the time.
Those are good tips, because that was one of the viewers' questions was, do you have tips for people who haven't reached like that level of confidence that Dorlin was talking about? That self-assurance on ways to shift their thinking and mindset. So along with that, do you guys have tips? Because she mentions it's a journey to shift your thinking and confidence, when you've been browbeaten and passed over repeatedly.
I think for me, it's community. I remember being in law school and my parents, everything I did was an achievement, like everything, even growing up, like everything I did was an achievement. And I didn't really value that until later on in life, that when I was being hard on myself, like Adriana talked about, right? And they were the cheerleaders saying, oh no, this is great, this is amazing, And I think having people around you when you feel that way, that you can go to, you can say, hey, I'm feeling like a fish out of water right now, or I'm not feeling so great about myself, or whatever. Having people to remind you of who you are and what you're capable of, at least for me, has been really, really important. And listen, if you really struggle, I'm going to put this out here, get therapy, talk to a therapist, a counselor, work through these issues, find out the root of it, dig deep. But, I know we don't like to talk about this, but this industry, the legal field, it is just ripe for mental health issues and all kinds of things. And then you add on the complexities of all these other issues. Just seek guidance, seek counsel. I'm proud to say that has been something really important in my life, and maybe it's not a therapist, maybe it's your faith, but look for those type of things that are going to affirm who you are as a person more than what you do and how you perform.
Well, first of all, Justina is just always amazing. I love her so much. And I just want to echo so much of what she said. Like, I agree 1000% in terms of like seeing a therapist, like that's very important. And also having those cheerleaders. I think the fact that I'm so confident has a lot to do with my childhood. So it's like way deeper than, anything that I can imagine. Like, my parents always told me that I had to believe in myself and that I'm capable of doing whatever I want to do. So that kind of shifted my narrative and my story. And I put myself in situations a lot of times, like Justina mentioned before, in places where I knew I had no business, but I listened to my father's voice, like, you can do this, you can do whatever you want to do. And I just did it, you know? And so I think that doing things like Adriana does every day are so critical, right? If you are battling with imposter syndrome or aren't confident in your daily life, because that gives you more reassurance. So for me, I had that reassurance very early on. And trust me, there are times where I feel like I'm failing and I'm not good enough. But I do see a therapist regularly. I am very spiritual, and I have a great community that supports me. And if you want to find that community, there are so many ways you can do that. There's so many great bar associations. You don't have to be Dominican to join the Dominican Bar Association. We are for sure a familia. You can come, the Hispanic Bar Association, the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. I have found some amazing mentors that have become friends that are just so supportive. And at first I was intimidated to talk to them. I was like, oh, I'm such a junior attorney. They're going to laugh at me, like all this stuff. And they have become great friends and just given me that confidence that I need to keep going. So we're here and we're a resource as well.
That's great. And thanks for that plug for Dominican Bar Association. At the beginning, I was like, hold up, how am I not a part of this? Like, I need to join. So thank you. So one of the questions is, how can non-Afro-Latino colleagues support you? And whoever wants to address that.
I would say mentorship, sponsorship. Don't box us in. Don't assume you know what it means. You know, I think the biggest things my colleagues can do is they can see my worth, see what I bring to the table, and let others know about that. Respect me on every level, right, at the highest levels. I think they seem so basic, but if more people would do that, I think we would be a lot further.
Just to piggyback again on that, right? As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the least diversified professions in the U.S. And I think we're talking about allyship, and, you know, it starts by recognizing implicit bias. Like, you know, if you are interviewing a candidate or you evaluating somebody's work, you know, make sure that you recognize if you have any implicit bias, or, you know, why are you feeling a certain way about this candidate or this associate? Are you evaluating that work more critically for whatever reason? And speaking out when you see others doing the same, when you're in these recruiting committee meetings, or in other spaces where you feel, where you see that folks are being marginalized. I think it's just speaking up.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Justina and Luis said. I think mentorship, sponsorship, just giving people the opportunities and being aware of our experiences helps. So coming to things like this is like the first step. But I'll add, and I don't know if others will agree with me, but I think when referring to people of color, calling us Black, there have been a lot of times where people, when they're referring to me, they'll call me African American, and I feel that it's not as inclusive, because you're as an Afro-Latina, you're sort of denying a big part of my background and who I am. And so I think just referring to people as Black is more inclusive, and it's little things like that, just vocabulary that can make a difference.
I think that's a great point, Adriana, because, you know, I've had folks ask me, so at the law firm, are you Latino? Are you Black? And folks may not, you know, they don't recognize that you are both. And having those candid conversations, right, with your white counterparts, having those real conversations. I mean, sometimes folks are afraid to have the conversation or embarrassed to have the conversation. I've had them candidly, particularly since George Floyd, right? And folks at law firms have been more, I'm talking about our profession, right? And law firms have been more open to engaging in dialogue. And sometimes you don't want to engage because you feel like I've engaged enough, like you should know this. This is so simple. But I think having the conversations is important.
Right. And if you guys don't mind sharing, how did you, as an Afro Latino, how did you deal with, the events of last year? And obviously that's been happening for years, but it was caught on camera. So how did you guys deal with George Floyd and all the others? So many names that we could go down. How do you deal with that as an Afro Latino?
I can say at the time I was at a firm. We were working remotely, right? We're in the middle of the pandemic. I ended up speaking up because nothing was really said from the firm, and I was a part of the diversity committee. I thought, how can we? I could barely work. I could barely focus, right? And although the firm does not have a lot of Blacks or Hispanics, I'm like, how can you just not address this? We don't live in a bubble. And it was a difficult time. It was a very difficult time. I don't know if I wasn't a senior associate and I wasn't on the diversity committee, if I would have said something, right? Or if I wasn't this far along in my career. I want to be honest about that. If I was a junior associate or someone newer, I don't know if, sometimes you don't feel like you have the license to do that. And I just want to honor that and respect that, and not, we're talking, all of us here are talking from a different place. But I will say, I thought, at least for me, it was important for me to speak up just because of the personal impact, let alone the reverberation, the national impact and all those other things, but the personal impact. I'm like, I'm a human first, not just a lawyer robot coming into work. And yeah, it was definitely a difficult time.
I agree. It was a really, really difficult time for me because I felt personally attacked as a Black woman. And it was especially difficult because I'm a prosecutor. And there are so many issues in our criminal justice system. And so just thinking about what I can do, what difference am I making? I'm grateful that I work at one of, if not the most progressive district attorney's offices in the country, but I wouldn't be a prosecutor if that wasn't the case. I can't even imagine being a prosecutor where George Floyd was killed. And it was just very, very hard. And it took me some time to cope with it, but I think that my way of coping was just really having those hard conversations about what we are going through, not only as a community, but also what we can do and what we're going through as lawyers. And I'm very grateful that I was able to host several panels about that discussion and have really hard conversations on the matter, but it was a very difficult time.
Yeah, no doubt about it, that it was very, very difficult. And, I was not at my current firm, I was at a different firm back then. And one of the difficulties was folks are reaching out to you as to what should we be doing. And at that point, it was a personal issue for me as a Black man. I've been stopped by police. My civil rights have been violated. I grew up in New York City. My car has been strip searched. So I just didn't want to engage in what should we be doing about this, right? Like, this is a personal issue for me, but for the grace of God, there go I. So that was very difficult because folks are reaching out, probably with good intentions, but this is something that it's very traumatic. Like, you saw this person's life just be taken away in such a brutal fashion that it was just difficult to deal with and engage at the firm in terms of what should we be doing about this. Like, I kind of did not want to deal with it. I had a really negative attitude towards folks reaching out to me, like, what should we be doing? And I was very involved in diversity and inclusion and equity efforts, right? So it was fair for folks to be reaching out to me, but I just did not want to deal with those things at that point in time.
Yeah, it was really difficult for me too. I was at another firm, not where I am now at the time, and no one really reached out to me in my group. So I relied very heavily on the Black Affinity group because we all obviously were feeling the same way. And so that was a big source of support for me during that time. I also noticed more so on social media, not really personally, but just sort of a bit of a divide in the Latino community on those issues as well, or with what was going on. And so that was also difficult. I feel like it raised awareness on the divide, I guess, amongst that culture. And so I just had conversations just with family. I remember one time I was crying. I was just very emotional. And I was talking to my mom and she was like, I didn't realize this affected you so much, because I think it was just a moment where she just realized like, you really identify as Black, like, and these things do affect you. So it was a moment of realization and a nice opportunity to just have these candid conversations. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and how you were affected and, you know, what you did about that. I really appreciate that. So we have time for one more question. We'll try to end on a high note. And the question is, what are the advantages of being Afro-Latinx heritage? And I know Dorlin and some other people have already kind of touched on this, but if you could list the advantages, what are the advantages in the legal field, in your profession, in your career?
I mean, one advantage for me is I'm a bilingual speaker, right? I speak fluent Spanish, I speak fluent English, and I do cross-border deals. And sometimes when my clients want to engage in the native tongue because they feel like they can connect with each other better when they're doing a deal in Latin America, I can be part of those conversations, right? I can appreciate also the cultural norms and how you address a counterparty in a contract, if that's going to be offensive. Like I understand the cultural nuances of engaging in those types of negotiations. So that's one advantage that I see is I'm multilingual. I can be added value in terms of helping you navigate not only in your native tongue, but also the cultural nuances engaging in negotiations and what might be offensive to somebody in Latin America.
I would say for me, it gives me a unique opportunity to be a resource. Oftentimes, I go into rooms and I am the only Afro-Latina. I go into rooms, or I've been in different positions where, you know, there are very few of us. And I think it's pretty amazing that I have this opportunity to even be on panels like this and encourage other people to know you are not alone. Your experiences, you know, are not entirely unique, and that, you know, the challenges that have come with that can be overcome, have been overcome, will be overcome. And you are a part of a very vast club of folks who are going to change and have already changed the world. So I love being able to say that to people, to say, you know, the things I've done, you're going to do even greater. And that you should, again, bring your whole self to everything you do. And just a fun response to your question, I thought I was going to say the food. Like the best of both worlds is just the food, you know, of being Black and being Latina.
Yes, the food and the music. Isn't it wonderful? I love it. Okay, so I lied. There is a quick question that I want to allow a minute for, and then we'll do closing remarks because I don't want to ignore the audience questions. And one of the viewers asked, how do you take time to unplug and take care of your physical and mental self? So we will end with that, and then I'll give closing remarks.
I'll speak on this first. Man, self-care is so important. And I feel that we're in a profession that doesn't truly appreciate that. or doesn't know how to do that because we're workaholics. I'm kind of grateful though that I'm from a younger generation where I do appreciate those things, and I pretty very much and am very adamant about taking time for myself. And I understand that during the week it may be pretty hard, but for me, I like shut down when it comes to work or bar associations or whatever at a certain time during the day. I don't care what's happening. But having time for myself so that I can be my best self at work is of most importance. Taking one day out of the weekend to spend with your family, you know, for yourself, to go to the mall, to go to the spa, I don't know, to do whatever you want to do, to just lay in bed and watch a movie. That's just so critical, but you have to be intentional about actually taking that time out. And if you don't do that, then it's not going to happen. And I understand that, you know, a lot of times we just push it off, like, yeah, I'm going to do it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. And then what is all this work even for? And I think remembering what's really important and prioritizing those things helps you make that decision to care about you first so that you can care for others.
That is great. Thank you. Did anybody else want to respond? All right. Well, with that, thank you so much to everyone. All the panelists, thank you. You know, I could thank you a million times for participating and sharing your experiences. This was wonderful, very enlightening. I hope everybody, all our viewers, I hope everybody learned something today. And thank you for keeping an open mind and just listening and engaging with us. Thank you again to Daryl, Tracy, Renee, all of ABA YLD leadership. We're so grateful for you guys. And with that, that's all. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.